Okay, so we're continuing to talk about sanity. So, like we mentioned last week, there's different levels of sanity, different kinds. Two major kinds. There's sanity that's relative to our conditioned state, and then there's basic or essential sanity of our Buddha mind. The the sanity we were born with and which has been with us our entire life and will be with us when we pass beyond this life, at least according to those people who have the intuitive chops to see past the veil uh, of a lifetime, past death. So we've talked about how there's um, social sanity, culture bound sanity that's relative to a particular culture. And if we go from one to another, it varies. What's considered perfectly reasonable and sane in one culture is considered totally crazy in another culture. Some culture says, oh, you can be married off in an arranged marriage when you're 12 years old. That's perfectly fine. Other cultures say that's crazy. For instance, there's so many examples like that of culture at large. Of course, we live in a destitute time. We live in a culture that's totally uh, it's totally out of balance, uh, isn't it? Consumerism, uh, materialism, capitalism. Won't get into monotheism, but I could. Um, where we're supposed to have dominion. Humans have dominion over all of the creatures of the world. We're no longer part of that dominion, but we're supposed to be in control, right? Capitalism, basic premise there, take more than you give. So the great interdependence of the biome, the ecosystem is violated by that principle alone. But we have like multi-dimensional situations going on that we have a culture that we all have to adapt to the culture. So we're saying according to the culture, but if the culture itself is sick, what does that say about us? And then, of course, there's the families that we grew up in where we had to adapt to the relational requirements, the psychic requirements of that family. And we've all succeeded and we've survived by shrinking ourselves to fit how we're supposed to be. So the wonderful thing about our sentience is it has a basic, um, un, undestroyable, indestructible sanity to it. So we shrink ourselves to fit to get on in the world. We develop our coping strategies. We create a safe ground, a secure ground for ourselves by deciding, learning that it's better that we do this rather than that, maybe being an entertainer, maybe being invisible, whatever. It's so every different for everyone that we mold ourselves in our own self-construction, fabricated creatively. Creatively, we've figured it out. And so we've gotten on. It's those defense structures that we needed as children, then we don't need them. But because they serve us so well and insulate us from the immensity of being, um, we keep them longer than we need to. But fortunately, the sanity leaks out in our discontent, our anxieties, our depression, eating disorders, this problem, uh, that bad habit, whatever addiction, whatever it is, brings to our attention that things are not okay inside. So the sanity comes out in our so-called symptoms. We won't dwell on the fact that psychiatry totally misunderstands this. So psychiatry and some psychology really being a handmaiden of the culture, serving a social hygienic function to keep the culture in its ruts, in its form. I don't know that I mentioned last time, but it was a thing when I was taking insurance money in my private therapy practice. The goal was very often to return to previous level of functioning. So somebody was depressed, they weren't waking up, they weren't going to work. We needed to get them back to work. And assuming that their despair was stupid or disordered, whereas the truth is it's intelligent. So we need to pay attention to that. And as we do, as we open up, and instead of being leading our life according to what they say, the shoulds and should nots of the they, now we begin to source ourselves from within, doing our psychological work, but also in terms of meditation practice, then tuning in. We just, we're quiet, we tune in, and we try to get a better sense of sourcing our life, moving forward from the inside out, according to our inner sense, our felt sense, right? It's a discovery. It's not canned. If it's a concept, somebody else has already canned it. And we have to source that from the inside out. So we do. So instead of running our life according to they, we run our life according to the me. And so this is just a review of last time, right? This is where the Dharma comes in. Because then we notice that's already an improvement. That's an upgrade, but it's still subject to the limitations of the me. That is, living my own life rather than someone else's. I'm going to love the things I love, and I'm going to hate what I hate, and I'm not going to care about the things I really don't care about. I'm not going to pretend I'm someone else. This is a victory of our psychological authenticity, psychological sanity. Nevertheless, we're still dominated by our own desires and aversions and indifferences. This is the Dharma. Comes in right at that point and says, pay attention to what's actually happening here. Pay attention to the existential actualities rather than the contrived ones. That even when we're sourcing our life inside like this, going after what we want and trying to get rid of or avoid what we don't, all of that leads to perpetual suffering, dukkha. Not only that, everything that we try, the security that we try to make for ourselves is inevitably impermanent. Everything's changing. So to the extent we chase our pleasures and avoid pain, we go after praise and avoid blame, we go for being recognized, not being overlooked or ignored. All of these worldly concerns, going for more money, not less, more stuff, all of these worldly concerns are all sources of suffering. But not only that, to want pleasure without pain is like wanting up without down. How sane is that? So the more that we tune in to what's actually going on, the cause and effect of sourcing ourselves from the me, we become aware it's just not that sane. So we keep going. we reckon with these existential givens, these marks of existence. Truth of suffering, the reality of impermanence, we're not going to be able to hold on to anything. And the self that we're trying to protect, promote, and defend is a total fabrication. It doesn't exist as an entity, as a solid thing. It's one thing to think about that. That's easy enough, even if we can endorse it or not. But the whole point is to see, is it true? That's what we want to do. To look into it for ourselves and to see that this self ground that we spend our life patrolling, defending, promoting, is there really, the Buddhist said there's nothing there. Well, is that true? So as we look into, for example, like who's calm, and this is why meditation is so valuable, because the mind's busy, and when we can calm that mind down through the samatha meditation, then we're more able to look into this question. Otherwise, we're just tripping, following our thoughts, not looking into the source of our thoughts. That's the vipassana part, where we look in to what is going on, who is defending and promoting, and so forth. The more that we get friendly with ourselves, the more that we tune in to our mind and are honest with ourselves about what's going on, the more we see that indeed we're coming from a place of lack, of wanting. So we want something more, something else. There's a way that we've lost ourselves as we are. And so we want either more of the good stuff, whatever's happening, and less of the bad stuff. And there's this weird sense that we have that we're not enough. Something incomplete about us. So this is the word that usually gets translated in Dharma as desire or ignorance. I think wanting is good. I like that because it captures both senses. There's something that we're not content with ourselves as we are. We feel ourselves that we're wanting. How do we look? Are we coming on? Like all this kind of checking that we can do. And of course, social media has just, exploded that. People just kind of checking their likes and everything like that. So we're wanting, and we want something more. So this striving, this source of striving comes from this sense of being incomplete. So this is where the smart money takes a hint from the Buddha and looks into what's really going on. Is it true that I'm wanting? And of course, to ask that question, we have to get out of the cover. The fabricated world we're living in, the conceptual world we're living in, the constructed world we're living in. So this is where we have to be able to drop our cognizance, our attention from being trapped in concepts and projections into something that's wider, deeper, and vaster, more sane, more existentially sane. So this is where this language like felt sensing becomes very practical. So it's not that we want to just not think. That maybe is valuable for a very short time, but otherwise it's a dead end. Concentration itself is a dead end, because we can be very concentrated. If you've been on an intensive retreat, then you know you can get very, very quiet, very, very still, very, very content. Everything's just copacetic. And then the retreat ends. Concentration, the conducive situation for concentration, you have to leave that lovely situation. Then what happens? Everything that's been quieted down will come back, because there's a basic intelligence, a basic sanity that wants us to be whole. So our predicament, unlike the other animals perhaps, is that we develop a sense of separateness from the environment, from the world. It goes with self-consciousness. We could say that it's a curse that we feel apart from the whole rather than a part of. I'm pretty sure the goldfinches never have that problem. It's a human problem. It's a human opportunity, because the pain, the suffering of our predicament uh, draws us, if we respect it, back to look into what is going on here. To the extent we're in sync and attuned to the greater intelligence of being, the wholeness of our mind, of our awareness, not bound in concept, there's no problem. In fact, things are quite good. But to the extent that we're in our constructs, we're apart from the whole and the flow. And so we find ourselves wanting. So we might be perfectly well adapted to society, sane on that level. We might be perfectly courageous enough to source ourselves from within. So we're sane on a psychological level, but we're still off a little bit or more on this more basic existential level, not in tune with the way things are. But we can trust that being out of tune will be reminded, because we will then feel anxious, despairing, guilt. We're not living this life as fully as we might. So there could be existential guilt, this sense that we have in the back, not quite complete. More I need to do in this life, something more. We could feel it like asked of me. It can seem like that sometimes. But there's a price. Carl Jung has said, has written, the most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely. And I know he meant that in a psychological sense, that it can be terrifying, it can be humiliating to own what we have pushed away so that we can funnel ourselves into a certain self-image. So we push whatever the thing is away. We repress stuff or we dissociate in order to survive. And so in order to be more whole on a psychological level, can be terrifying, can be humiliating. That these are the thoughts I'm really having. Embarrassing. But it's the only way to come to what we say authentic, the authentic self, true self on the psychological level of sanity. We have to own our whole selves, all of our feelings and our thoughts, our sadnesses, our griefs, our lusts, our aversions, our indifferences. But he may have also thought it in an additional way, and certainly with the Dharma, there's an additional way that it's terrifying, or can be, to accept ourselves completely, which is to see that there's nothing to see in terms of this self we take ourselves to be, to allow ourselves to see that our projects in life, we get more of this and less of that and so on, are all groundless, contrived, fabricated. When we have a glimpse of that, the bottom falls out. So we were talking last week about how it can be frightening, terrifying to let the bottom fall out. Shields, drop the shields, right? It's always a scary moment in Star Trek when Captain, the shields, we have no shields. The Klingons are out there. Our shields are down. Oh no, the shields up, the shields up, right? But it's scary. It is. That's uh, that's the price. There's always a price. To stay within our defenses, within our boundaries, there's a price. There's always a niggling, something not enough, anxiety, something is going to be coming up. We pay that, but that's the price. Or we do our best to drop the shields, and there's a price. Insecurity. Basic sanity, unconstructed, uncontrived, not conditional to anything. Leaves us in a free fall. Leaves us free. And at first it feels like we're falling, untethered. That's the price. It's the only way we can learn and discover for ourselves it's not a problem, because there's no ground to fall into. We're not going to crash. There's nothing to crash into. And, someone can say that to us. We can read it somewhere. But we really don't trust it until we find out for ourselves. So to venture deeper degrees of sanity, like a personal sanity that doesn't accord anymore to the consensus reality, we can pay a price. We're going to go our own way, not the way we're supposed to go. Our parents think we should go. Our friends, our spouse, our children think we ought to go. We're going to really just go from within. That can create a discord. Also, when we open up more into unconditional presence, we become more unpredictable ourselves. And the challenge is, do we dare it? Can we risk it? So we can play on that edge, can't we? Why not? We don't have to like go all in. We can play that edge and see, is it okay to be present without having to, you know, keep the conversation going? This is the fear on radio, to have dead air, right? But if we're not going to just go along with chit chat in certain situations, sometimes, it's wise to go along because we're reassuring somebody, but we need to just be honest that, okay, we're paying a price for that. We're getting involved in somebody else's neurosis. That can happen. So in terms of practicing towards a basic sanity, we go through this wider awareness, felt sensing, non-conceptual presence, opening up to that and according to that, aligning with it, habituating to being open. As we do that, insights arise inevitably. Shifts occur, bodily shifts happen. And then the practice can become a little different. Becomes rather than one of mindfulness, one of relaxing into no mind, in the Zen sense of no mind, no mindfulness. But no mindfulness contains mindfulness. Just like when we go through I have a psychological sanity, we're going to go our own way. We also can be totally operative within the consensus reality. We still stop at red lights, but we don't have to be dominated by the shoulds and should nots. We stop because we want to stop, because it's easier that way. I'm using that metaphorically, but also because like relationally, we can accord to somebody because we don't want to upset them. Also, it could be dangerous in some situations. So we're savvy, but we know we're doing it rather than being bound. We're doing it deliberately rather than habitually, reactively. So the shift from relative sanity to this basic sanity is the difference between reacting to situations and spontaneously responding. So I think that's enough of that. I'll leave that there and open it up to whatever comments or questions. Yeah, so we can start in here.
And for those of you on Zoom, if you raise your hand with the hand emoji, then it can call on you quicker.
Hi, this is Virginia. Hi, Ken.
Hi, Virginia.
Hi, everyone. I'm just so resonating with your words. It's just so, and the meditation took me to a really deep place of home where, I just got very spacious. And it doesn't get any better. There's nothing for me on this sensual world, in the material world, that even compares. Yeah, so I'm just really grateful to be hanging out in this absolute place.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
pretty yummy. And yet, in the relative world, I can get involved in lots of stuff. And it seems like the work is to look at, how much is necessary. Some of the material world stuff needs to be tended to. Like, I need a roof over my head.
Mm.
If I was living in India or someplace, I may not.
You would have other problems.
Yeah.
Trust me.
I've been there, I know. um, um, so it seems like really discerning, like when I'm just getting the basic needs met, and when I'm getting the adaptive neurotic needs, when I'm going after those. Um, and there's still a lot of that going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, and then I kind of get upset with myself for, because I can see it, and then it's kind of compulsive and it keeps going. And then here I am just sitting in the absolute, and it's, it just feels, it's really nourishing for the one who gets too busy and caught up.
You bet. Yeah. So practice has, there are various practices depending on our predicament and our situation. This is where it can be helpful to have a few different ways to roll. So if it's possible to access the absolute, then the practice is one of relaxing and letting the system recalibrate to that vibration, habituate to that way of being, which if we respect the Dharma, we are totally not habituated to that because of lifetimes we've been doing the other thing. So the fact that then later stuff comes up and we get caught up in things is not a surprise. So when there, relax into it, and there's training relaxing. We'll talk about this on the retreat more. But then when stuff comes up, and then we catch ourselves, and then we judge ourselves. Okay, now we need a softener, a softening approach. Something like Tonglen, it can be really useful. Right? Well, we don't push it away. We breathe it in, but then maybe we need to breathe out self forgiveness. That metta. And so we work on that level. And if that doesn't work because we're just too worked up, we're really worked up. Mindfulness is the ground, is the floor. We can always watch our breath and not lose our mind. You say, lose the mind. What is that? Lose the mind. Lose the mind is losing the mind in thought forms. It could be neurotic. It could be something like dissociative. It could be something psychotic. It's all concept thought forms. That's losing our mind. This is where psychology, our contemporary psychology, is confused because it thinks that's the all of mind. No, that's only the conceptual mind. It isn't the mind that is in our intuitive, feelingful, wider, deeper way of being cognizant. The Zen master Dogen says, people think the mind has to do with thoughts and ideas and opinions and concepts. The mind has to do with trees and fence posts and tiles and dirt. It's a very Zen kind of thing, getting us into the world, into the natural world, out of the head. So we apply what we need to apply given what we're dealing with.
Thank you. Anyone else have a question maybe on Zoom? Okay, we have a question in the hall.
Hi, it's Carol. I wonder if it's kind of basic, I'm sure, but what is your definition of sentient? Sentience?
Sentient.
You use it a lot and I don't really know what you mean.
Yeah. I love that word. You know, I just like the word. I like the word because it has resonances that I find meaningful, sensitive, sensible, sensate, non-conceptual, sensate, sentient beings. Who are these beings? Not just us, right? Beings that have awareness. Normally we say it's beings that have a mind. I suppose that's fair because there is a difference between trees and plants and animals and insects. There is a difference. And we know that the the wood wide web has intelligence. It's not clear that it has this the sentience of mind, though. I think we just don't know. It doesn't really matter. So that's what I mean by sentient.
So is it on? So when I say, may all sentient beings be free from suffering and the causes of suffering, I'm not saying the trees too.
You can, I think it's what I think maybe we can. It sort of whatever you feel. I mean, who draws the line? Right? I mean, rocks. Now I think we have to draw the line. Rocks. But there are people, geologists, who might disagree. I'm not going to argue. And then we have this. Gems, yeah. I love, there's Annie Dillard wrote this great book teaching us stone to talk. What is she doing? I don't know.
The Zoom audience can't hear you. Marie said, do you remember the guy with the pet rock?
Well, just I don't know when this in the 80s or something, the guy that made millions off the pet rocks. That's giving them some value.
Richard has a question.
Jose does too.
Oh,
Anyone
okay.
on Zoom have a question real quick? No one?
Zoom,
Okay.
Zoom.
It's just a
Zoom.
comment about that topic from the plants and the rocks. The meditators that remind the past lives never remind being a tree. They remind being maybe animals and other kind of beings, but never remind being a tree. But still in Tibet, there have been developed this because they wonder. But yeah, we can add every tree, every rock, every river in that matter, because I think that is part of us living in this planet.
Yeah, there's like weird things, like like redwoods and sequoias have very long DNA strands, much, much longer than ours. So may all sentient beings be happy. I mean, there's particularly those ones who suffer. And if you have attuned inness to trees and you can feel their suffering, I think it's entirely possible myself. And it gets a little woo-woo. And so, go for it. If you're dialed into that, go for it. If you're like, oh, come on, then don't bother. Just whatever sentient beings mean to you. It's beings with awareness. That's the point.
Who had the question?
Is this on? Yeah. Well, this isn't my question, but as far as rocks, are concerned, I'm a gemologist, and there's a story in every one. But that just came up. The question I have is about a word that gets in my face a lot: reification. And I have a sense of, like, at times life has this beautiful flow, and then every once in a while there's like a roadblock, and something seems solid that is a little off at that time. And then all of a sudden it goes back to the flow and everything just seems perfect. And that word has been brought to my attention both with spiritual teachers and with reading.
Yeah, that's a good counterpoint to sentience. Because we reify it means to make something real
Or solid.
and solid. And it's a fabrication. To reify a thing, we fabricate and construct. And then we take that construction that we fabricated as something that's unfabricated. It's like a given. It's the way things are. Whereas it's really just the way we see it. And to the extent we see it solidly, it's more reified. And the more solidly we see things, right, then the less flexibility there is. Tighter things are. So like there's, like some people like have to keep their yards and their driveway and everything like spotless and no leaves on them or no grass coming up in the cracks. Some people like are really intense about that, right? That's like, they're putting a lot of energy into keeping control. So reification is kind of a control thing. Always, and it's, if you look into it, see that it's always conceptual. That we take our concepts to be real, our opinions, our ideas. This went off. Rather than as play, fluid, insubstantial, like a rainbow, like a mirage, like a dream. So this is what the Buddha observed. Because our existence is it's like a bubble in water, like a star at dawn, a rainbow, a dream. It's not real in this solid sense of we're talking about. It's way more loose and illuminating, light, of the nature of light. Now we know that through physics. Everything is of the nature of light. But that's like a concept to us. So the challenge of practice, the opportunity of practice, is to see if it's true. We can, and so with with meditation practice, it's so secure, it's so safe. We could take like a psychedelic drug and maybe have access to that. But on the one hand, it's a little more dangerous. And on the other hand, then the trip will be over. And we will have done nothing to stabilize our awareness, our absolute awareness. In fact, what could happen is our capacity for stabilizing in unconstructed, unconditional presence will be weakened for a while. Our capacity goes way up while we're on a psychedelic, and then it goes down below where it was when we started, and then we have to, recover. So meditation, much better way to go, as a path. I think we're out of time. So, by the merit that we have generated here tonight, by listening, reflecting, and meditating on the Dharma, may we obtain clear light, awareness, and may our conflicting emotions be dispelled. May all beings be happy and have the causes of happiness. May we be free of suffering and its causes. May we never be parted from happiness, free from sorrow. May all beings be free of their projections, conceptual fixations, and emotional holdings, and filled with loving kindness, sympathetic joy, perfect equanimity, unflinching, uncompromising equanimity, and real, heartfelt compassion for self and other. May all beings everywhere be free.